All right. Welcome to my daily update where I talk about the most interesting growth in marketing content I found out there on the internet. Today is April 17th, 2024. I will warn you that today is a little more somber. We're talking about the state of the SaaS industry with articles by Jason Lemkin, Maxio, and GTM Partners, but there is a little bit of a bright spot at the end. All right, let's dive in here. All right, to kick us off, let's take a look at this report from Maxio. Maxio is really interesting because they have access to back-end billing data for B2B SaaS companies. And so they have some really meaningful and real data. And so this is a report they put out, the growth state of B2B SaaS businesses in January of 2024. And when we look here at this chart, which is the average growth rates for B2B subscription companies, I think this is really interesting. If you look at companies between 1 million and $100 million in billing, they had a peak of growth at 31% in Q2 of 2022. You can see since then it's just tailed off to a minimum of 18% in Q4 of 2023. And so that's the low. So you can see a continual drop in terms of growth. And the same thing is true when you look at all companies up to $100 million in billings. The decline isn't quite as significant, but it's still there. And so the SaaS industry is definitely feeling this from a growth perspective. There are significant declines in growth rates, but the good news is there's still growth there. And then they go on to talk about the number of PE and VC deals. You can see it reached a peak in Q4 of 2021, and since then it's just really tailed off, which I think we're all aware of. But here it is in chart form. The next thing I wanted to cover is from this report from GTM Partners, which is a great report. I highly recommend you check it out. Very interesting data. They surveyed 300 different companies or marketing leaders within these companies, sales and marketing leaders within these companies, and asked them some questions about, overall performance, how they're feeling about things. And so they raised three questions to them that are covered in this chart. Has your marketing pipeline been impacted by economic conditions? Has your sales velocity been impacted? And are you on track for revenue attainment goals in 2023? Now, in July of 23, 37% said revenue attainment was worse than they expected. When you go to December of 2023, that number jumps up to 56%. So you can see that even when you survey people, they're feeling that same impact. They're just missing their revenue numbers. More than half of people are missing their revenue numbers. And so that sort of supports what we're seeing in Maxio, that decline in terms of performance. And so another piece of bad news. But again, check out this report. The last thing I wanted to go over was this report from Jason Lemkin. And his question is pretty frank: is SaaS dead? And so he starts the article off by saying there's a bit of malaise hanging over the SaaS world today. AI excitement obscures it a bit, but it's there. And he goes over a bunch of bullet points talking about some of the negative feeling within the SaaS industry. And the first thing he starts off with is growth has slowed everywhere. And those previous things that we looked at kind of supports this contention. Yes, growth is slowed. Sales is so much harder. The old playbooks aren't working well, and I think that's true. Um, it is. It's harder than it was before, and the old playbooks aren't as effective. It used to be. So we have to get more creative. There's more competitors. Different companies are encroaching on each other's space. Profitability is all that matters. And so there's a bunch of points here that he raises in terms of the feeling that we have in SaaS, which is, basically demonstrated in numbers in those previous two articles that I shared. And he says, the list goes on. He says, there's a lot of truth in all this. What I think is really fueling it, though, is the length of the downturn in SaaS buying, in SaaS multiples, and SaaS valuations. And so he shares a few charts sort of highlighting this. And similar to that deal chart from Maxio, you can just see the declines from 2021. And here's valuations. And you can see a very similar pattern, though it hit a little bit earlier than the previous one did in terms of valuations. And so the numbers continue to support that sort of feeling. And so then he has some recommendations in terms of what we should be doing. And so first, go all in and driving true efficiency gains for your customers. And I think this is so critical. You have to demonstrate the value. He's like, we've always sort of faked efficiency of business software with ROI calculators and such. Now is the time to do it for real. If you could truly eliminate half the headcount in the support department or half the SDRs, or truly make an engineer 2 times as productive, now is the time. But prove it for real. Nail this. And then he goes on to say, you need to close every customer. And so basically, it's just fighting tooth and nail for every customer. Do what it takes to close them. And then he talks about growing usage faster than revenue. So even if revenue is challenging, if you get people more engaged with your product, that will set you up well for the future. But the one thing he does share one bright point, which is at the end of the day, SaaS spending is grown over 10% a year, every year for forever. And even this year is going to do the same thing. We're about to get to $1 trillion in overall software spend, and customers are continued to spend on this. So there is money out there, but it is more difficult. And so thinking about the points that he raised about really demonstrating efficiency, helping your customers is so critical. And I think the bright spot is here is if you look at HubSpot's stock. So here's the peaks, and it's kind of similar to that chart we saw, and then it fell off. But look what it's done since then. It's really grown. So if you're able to demonstrate that value to your customers, if you're able to show that value, if you're able to bring something really meaningful to them, you can grow in this environment. Yes, it may be more challenging, but you got to get back to the basics. It's not just growth at all costs. It's really about focusing on brand, and delivering that value. So if you're able to do that, you can be successful. It may be more challenging, but you can be successful. I think HubSpot really demonstrates that. All right. Well, hope you found that interesting. That's my update for today. Again, let me know if you have any comments or questions, and I will see you tomorrow.